Our guest in this segment is Delegate Michael Hite. Michael, good morning to you. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, gentlemen.
We just spoke to your caucus chairman, Michael Hornby, and he said things had gotten a little bit interesting there when he had to leave the room.
Things always get interesting when he leaves the room.
I guess you guys are discussing some vaccination legislation because that was, I believe, part of the discussion we had for him, had dealt with some of the amendments being made to this legislation. Mike, where are we with that legislation as you understand it, and in your prime position as the Vice Chair of Health and Human Resources?
Well, the legislation came over to us from the Senate. It was to provide religious philosophical exemptions. And we got over here, went through the Health Committee. There were a lot of concerns, a lot of testimony both ways. What ended up happening is it got reduced. What we found out through testimony also was we already have medical exemptions here in West Virginia, but they weren't being granted for whatever reason. There were a very minimal amount being granted. Some of them were even being granted on a temporary basis and then revoked. And it was because I think everything had to go through the state health officer to be approved. And according to some testimony, they were just rubber stamping them no from the get-go. Anyway, what ended up happening here in our committee is we tried to get out the best bill we thought we could get out of the committee. And what that was enhanced medical exemptions that allowed for a broader range of medical individuals to grant the exemption, but took out the religious and philosophical portion of the bill totally. And that's what came out of the House Health and Human Resources Committee.
I'm told, Mike, that some people in higher offices want to make sure there's some kind of tracking on the exemptions. Is that going to be a part of this bill, as you understand it?
That is part of the bill right now. There is a tracking aspect of it that each county will provide a number of exemptions that were given within that county on an annual basis.
I asked Delegate Hornby this. I'll ask you the same thing. Has this bill been reviewed repeatedly as a result of the measles outbreaks right now going on in the country? The last article I read this morning said it's now over 300 cases.
You know, surprisingly, I don't know that really affected any of the discussions or the thought process of what was going on through committee. I don't really think it had anything to do with that. And I thought it would, because we were right in the middle of discussing it when all that came out. And it didn't seem to, affect the discussion one way or the other within our committee. Now, it may have in the minds of some people, but, they didn't bring it up.
Mike, let me ask, how does the whole process kind of work when it comes to that vaccine? Now, let me give you kind of a scenario that even Delegate Mike Hornby had brought up earlier when it came to a medical exemption. When I was a little guy, I believe it was the smallpox vaccine, I was allergic to. Swole up, went to the hospital, high fever, a whole lot of things going on. Let's say my parents had another child a year or two later, and they said, hey, our prior son had a reaction. We really don't want our current child to go through that vaccine. What would that process be, and how would that medical exemption work or not work?
Well, that would be determined by the medical doctor, your physician, that you take, your pediatrician that you take your kids to, and if they think that this could be a hereditary trait that is causing the vaccination issues, then they could grant that immunity to the other children as well.
So it's the physician who would grant that, But as you were saying, that there's some kind of paperwork then that it has to go through the health department, and someone eventually has to say yes or no?
No, nothing that has to go through the health department. It's strictly left up to the pediatrician or doctor who is actually seeing the patients and interacting with them and seeing how they interact with the vaccines, as a family or as an individual. So before, it was very detached. The state health officer was granting them, and they never had any contact with the family or the individual child. So we wanted to get away with that and make this on a case-by-case basis, so that the physicians could make those decisions.
Mike, is that, if you had your way, if you were the person with the final say, is that how you would have a final bill read?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I was okay with the religious exemptions. If you look around, we're sort of an outlier here in West Virginia, where all the states surrounding us and even broader out have a religious exemption. I don't see what the religious exemption would have hurt. The percentage of people that get a religious exemption is pretty low. So I didn't have a problem with that portion of it.
Is the
philosophical, I thought maybe was a stretch, but I was okay with the religious.
Is the religious exemption dead, or is that still an active part of the negotiations?
Well, here's the interesting thing. There was someone in health that tried to kill the bill as it came out. There was only one no vote in the health committee, and it was because there was no religious or philosophical exemption in there. The problem with voting no for the bill in its current form in committee is, if you don't get it to the floor, you don't allow for people to make amendments to get those exemptions back into the bill and have the whole body of the House vote on those. So in its current form, it is just medical, but there are, I've heard, 10 or 11 different amendments that are going to go into this bill once it reaches the floor. So there is a possibility that the religious and philosophical could get back into the bill. So this was the only way for that to happen, was to get it out of committee. My personal opinion is that may, depending on which amendments are approved or not approved, that could kill the bill.
In regards to exemptions and tracking, I just got a text that asked, if you're tracking who's getting an exemption, will you also be tracking the physicians that are granting the exemptions? And this would go to certain physicians could become known as the exemption doctor. So if you really want an exemption, you got to go to this doctor, and they'll pretty much rubber stamp your exemption.
No. There are provisions within the bill that allow for criminal penalties if a doctor is negligent in their duties. So nobody saw any reason to track how many doctors or where the kids are coming from or whatever. The only thing we wanted in there, or the only thing that came out of the bill, is how many per county were granted, period.
Ultimately, what bill do you think is going to get out of both houses and signed by the governor?
I'll be quite honest, I don't know at this point. I think the Senate is really set on, they want either religious or philosophical or both in the bill. That's how they sent it over to us. If both of those are put back into the bill on the House side, I think it dies on the House side. The only way I think it gets back over to the Senate is if it's just the way it is right now, or maybe just the way it is now plus religious. If it gets off the floor that way, I think the Senate would buy into that, but I think that's a stretch.
Is there specific language as to what qualifies as a religious exemption? Or is it just that, hey, my religion says I can't get this vaccine, so I'm out?
Yep, that's it.
All right, Matt Miller.
When you talk about hearing testimony, is that testimony coming from, say, individuals who have been through an experience and/or doctors, or is that testimony coming from other delegates based on things maybe they're hearing from their constituents?
Yeah, that's one of the differences this year is each bill has what they call a hearing phase. And that's the first thing that happens to a bill when it comes to committee. So during the hearing phase, and that's all we do is just listen to individuals get up and speak to the bill, and sometimes they're subject matter experts, and sometimes they are just people from the public that have had issues with a specific bill. In this case, maybe how their children have reacted to the vaccines, or some issues they may have had with the state in trying to get exemptions. So we listen to them in the hearing phase. This particular bill, it was very, very lengthy. There were many people that came and spoke. Some of them were physicians. Some of them were professors, doctors in the professor world. Some of them were individuals that had issues with vaccines and testified on how they were treated within the system, even on medical exemptions, which is why we did some enhanced medical revisions to the bill, that there were individuals that had a federal medical exemption and moved here and were denied here in the state of West Virginia with their federal medical exemption. So the enhancements we did were try to address some of those issues. So yeah, we listened to a lot of testimony, a lot of different people. Anybody can put their name on the docket to speak.
You mentioned those change in rules and how things are progressing a little more slowly. What was the reasoning maybe behind that in making that change heading into this particular legislative session?
Well, I think there were people, especially in the leadership, that felt like when we did hearings, we didn't have a hearing on every single bill before. Occasionally there would be a bill that was controversial like this that somebody would request a public hearing, and we would do it in the chamber, and people would come and speak their mind. And we sort of did away with that and put those hearings back into committee. Now, the purpose for that, well, a lot of people had a problem with that, but the purpose for that is you had a more attentive crowd at that point. So because you were in committee before, nobody was required to go to the public hearings. So a lot of delegates didn't go. They were in other committee meetings or whatever. They had other things to do. So they didn't attend and they didn't hear what the public was saying. In this, you have to sit in committee and you hear the public in committee. So I think it helps the public and it helps the committee members to be able to ask questions of the public, and they weren't allowed to do that before either. So I think it's a better process all around.
Is Certificate of Need dead, Mike, or does it still have some legs somewhere?
I would say it's pretty dead this year. Now, I know Delegate Clark is trying to run a mini CON, I think, which would provide a CON exemption in just growth counties. So that would affect the Panhandle, but it would not affect those counties that are losing population in the more rural areas.
I've not heard a peep about home rule for counties since this legislative session began. Is that because nothing's happening on it, or is it just being quietly worked on?
Well, it's not called home rule for counties. It's called the Safer Communities Act, and it is going right now. It is House Bill 2922. It is in Gov.org. I have a meeting today to meet with their caucus, and talk to them about it. And then I think it will be on the agenda tomorrow or Monday. So we will start seeing it move in Gov.org sometime soon.
You have gotten beaten up online about this, so tell me, what is the truth behind this legislation and what is the myth?
Well, the truth behind the legislation is it can only be used for emergency services or fire, EMS, SROs in schools. It is a 1% sales tax or a 1% amusement tax for counties who wish to have it, and it goes to a referendum at the general election, currently only the general election. It would be put on the ballot, and the people from each individual county would have an opportunity to vote yes or no whether or not they want this particular tax or not.
Mike, how often would that vote take place? In other words, let's say this passes, our next general election, the folks in Berkeley County have an opportunity to vote for or against it. They vote against it. Can it be brought up then the very next year? Is there a time period in between?
No, there's no time period in between. So if it were to fail, I mean, the county commission could essentially put it on the ballot the next time there's a general election, which would be 2 years down the road. But that would be up to them.
Okay. So if this bill, if
it passes, that it would not come back up again. There's no sunset on it.
So if HB 2922 passes, Mike, this does not automatically create a 1% sales tax, correct?
That is correct. It does not.
The county commissions would have to vote on whether they want one, and then it would have to go to the voters in a referendum.
That is correct. The people of the county would decide whether or not they want to tax themselves.
And that would be approved by majority vote, not 2/3 or 3/4, just simple majority.
That's correct.
All right, very good. You, as a member of the Health and Human Resources Committee, we've spoken before about the child situation, foster care in West Virginia. Do you have any new information on that? We had Adam Burkhammer on last week or week before, I believe it was, and he gave us some pretty information. Yeah. Do you have any additional information, anything coming out?
No, not really. Everything that has to do with foster care, Adam is the expert on. Him and Delegate Pinson, I think Delegate Vance, are all foster care parents, and they do wonderful things with foster care, and they are well versed in the issues with the system, and they work very closely with the Department of Health and Department of Human Services with foster care issues. And when things aren't running the way they should, then they introduce bills to try to fix the system. So I try not to speak out of my realm.
HB 2440, is this the bill that would look to move city elections to the same time as the regular primary and general elections?
I believe so. That is Chiarelli bill, I believe. Or is that?
It's on your page. It says relating to the time and place of holding primary elections.
No, that one. No, that's my presidential election bill.
Oh,
we call it the Delta House bill. What it would essentially do is move the state primary for presidential elections to the Tuesday before Super Tuesday, therefore making West Virginia relevant in presidential elections, presidential primaries.
I think that's a great idea. Right now, West Virginia is just so late, it's already pretty much decided by the time you get there.
That is my point as well. So right now you have Iowa, and then you go to New Hampshire. Now they would come down to West Virginia before they would go to Super Tuesday. I think it would be an economic boon. I think presidential candidates would have to spend time in West Virginia campaigning. They would have to run ads in and around West Virginia. They would have to spend money here. So that was our, well, and I say our, it's got my name on it, but it was something we discussed in and around the Delta House, and we call it our Delta House bill.
Who all is residing at the Delta House these days, by the way?
So the regular group that's been there, Hite, Hornby, Chiarelli, and Willis. Daryl Coles is back with us again this year. And then our new addition is Delegate out of, I think the Pendleton area. His name is Jonathan Kyle. He's the new guy.
All right. Well, did you haze him?
Well, a little bit.
Did you have to get your dry cleaning?
He's a pretty good guy.
He didn't have to get your dry cleaning at like 3 a.m. or anything like that?
No.
Yeah, he's out of Randolph, by the way.
Randolph, yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. Randolph County. All right. And Chiarelli's bill about moving the primary elections or moving the city elections to the regular primary and general dates or whatever, Mike, is that going to get anywhere?
I'm hoping. I think that's a good bill, and I'd like to see it move. I think I signed on to that with him, so I got my fingers crossed on that one.
All right. Very good. If there's anything else you wanted to bring up, now's the time to do it.
No, just looking forward to getting some of these bills passed, getting through to crossover day, and just getting to it.
What is that, about a week away, week and a half?
Yeah, it's about, I think sometime next week is crossover, and we'll be taking up just the Senate bills. We'll be done with all the House bills, except for the budget. I mean, the budget's one of the last things we do.
All right, very good. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, gentlemen. Good to talk to you.
Have a good day.